Good afternoon. I'm Chris Nachkate. Welcome to APTN National News Daytime. A First Nation in northern Saskatchewan says a lack of medevac options, poor coordination, and a number of government service gaps is to blame after a couple in their 50s was stranded on an island for nearly 2 days. Here's an update. According to the Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation, a couple in their 50s departed from Tate Island in northeastern Saskatchewan on November 13th at around 2 p.m. when they experienced engine trouble with their boat. The couple reached Milton Island on Reindeer Lake and became stranded and started taking on water. Cold and wet, the couple managed to survive by huddling under a blanket and kept a fire from going out. Peter Ballantyne says the RCMP was contacted on the evening the couple went missing, but did not activate a search or notify search and rescue services, even though the couple did not return as planned. They also say the RCMP was not familiar with the lake system and did not search the following day, leaving community members to search alone. No cell service was another issue and only further delayed help. Almost 2 days later, a L'Orange EMS helicopter finally managed to save the couple on November 15th after community members located them. Both were suffering from hypothermia and are expected to be okay. In a statement, Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation Chief Peter Beattie called for both the federal and provincial governments to strengthen its emergency response in the north. They added, "These gaps in the provincial emergency response system placed a northern family at significant risk. We are asking for equitable emergency services. Northern residents should receive the same emergency support as any other citizen, free of the systemic inequities that our nation continues to face." Chief Beattie closed by saying they are ready to work with government to advance long-term solutions. 2 Manitoba First Nations are suing the federal and provincial governments over oil and natural gas rights. In a claim filed last week, they say the rights were given away without proper consultation. The Kanupa-Wakpa Dakota First Nation and Dakota Teepee First Nation say they are entitled to government-owned subsurface rights in southwestern Manitoba. The claim stresses private landowners are not targeted in the action.
The word Dakota means the allies, so we're very much wanting to be allies, but it seems where provincial and federal governments are not so quick to come to the table with us.
The province says they are unable to comment since the matter is before the courts. The federal government did not respond to CTV's request for comment.
Deliberately and strategically, the Dakotas were excluded from the numbered treaties. This means the Dakotas have never surrendered their rights or title, and they have unceded rights to the land.
The legal action centers on a portion of the mineral-rich Williston Basin that is located in the southwestern corner of the province. The province generates over $1.3 billion worth of oil and gas annually, some of which comes from the basin. It says the federal government granted subsurface rights to private landowners in Manitoba, but claims the First Nations were never consulted. The 2 First Nations are now seeking an unspecified amount in damages for oil revenue and for the government's alleged failure to compensate them. Farron Trippier, the Dakota Nation's lawyer, says he aims to have the case heard within 5 years. The Red Dress Alert System for missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit is now one step closer to launching in Manitoba. A final report has now been released detailing how Indigenous community members want to see the project realized. APTN Sav Jonesa reports.
The final report for Manitoba's Red Dress Alert System pilot project released significant findings early Tuesday. Indigenous people do not view police as trustworthy or culturally competent when it comes to filing missing persons reports and initiating searches in the province. That's why a special alert system is urgently needed for when Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people go missing, says the report.
You know, there are over 1,000 recommendations about safety for Indigenous women. So this report contains no recommendations. It's a plan to create a safer place, a safer world for our loved ones.
The final report comes after a year of community consultations with MMIWG2S impacted families, survivors, and service providers to learn how best to implement a red dress alert system. Dozens of Manitoba-wide engagement sessions and more than 1,000 anonymous online surveys helped create a blueprint for the program set to go into effect next year. A family friend of 15-year-old Tina Fontaine, who was murdered in 2014, says community input makes all the difference when it comes to creating a system that works.
They came to see us. They came and listened to us. They came and asked us, what do we need? And our families told them, we need protection. We need you to care.
The pilot project explored areas of strengths and weaknesses with the current process of reporting a missing person to police, including myths around how long you need to wait to create a report. It was found an Indigenous-led 24/7 call system is necessary, with an option for those at high risk to voluntarily share their information in case they go missing. The Red Dress Alert system will coordinate with police and other organizations and issue public alerts through channels like social media, billboards, and phone alerts. MMIWG2S family member Nikki Kamasuktisak says this project shows what Indigenous women will do to take care of their family.
This Red Dress Alert project is a testament to that, to the hard work that Indigenous women have to face against colonialistic practices that are still prevalent today.
The final report hopes to create a system that can ensure effective, rapid, and coordinated efforts to finding missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
An Ontario Superior Court has dismissed a lawsuit against Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand and former Métis National Council President Clem Chartier. The lawsuit had alleged Chartrand and Chartier misspent millions of dollars of MNC funds between 2019 and 2021. APTN's Fraser Needham reports.
MMF President David Chartrand says the lawsuit was never anything other than a political persecution.
Well, I feel vindicated, and so does the rest of the team. It clearly was obviously seen by the court as a vengeance and vindictive utilization of the MNC funds to try to damage our names, our reputation, and the MMF's good name in government. So when you start looking at what this was all about, it was individuals trying to get vengeance.
The MMF left the MNC in September 2021. Shortly after, the Métis National Council brought forward the lawsuit. The ruling says Chartrand and Chartier acted honestly and did not set out to harm the MNC and acted in the best interests of the MNC and Métis Nation. In her ruling, Justice Merritt further says, there's no evidence Chartrand or Chartier breached their fiduciary duties. They did not set out to destroy the MNC or harm it financially to benefit themselves. And there's no proof that there was any scheme or scorched earth policy against the MNC by the defendants. Chartrand says, unfortunately, the current regime of the MNC has spent millions of dollars on this litigation that could have went to legitimate services for Métis people.
Well, it does damage in the context that somebody can misuse funds in that concept to try to get vengeance and use dollars that should have went to elders and youth and programs and services. That for sure is something if I was not a politician, but Métis citizens at home, I'd be very upset that they did this to the money that should have been used on us in some form or fashion.
APTN News reached out to the MNC, but they declined an in-person interview. However, in a press release, the organization says it is disappointed in the outcome and it had brought the case forward in good faith and is still reviewing the decision. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Saskatchewan's first Indigenous MLA was recently honored in a special ceremony. That story when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Monday, Saskatchewan's NDP held a reception to honor Joan Beattie, the first Indigenous woman ever elected to the Saskatchewan legislature. Joan Beattie then became the first First Nations woman appointed to the Saskatchewan cabinet. Beattie, also a former CBC journalist, told guests about the importance of representation in the legislature.
It's so huge because your point of view, when you, especially if you're in cabinet or just you've been in your caucus, they need to hear the kinds of things that we're going through, in whether it's in a small northern community, Indigenous community, the challenges that we face. They need to hear that.
Beattie served as an MLA for 5 years from 2003 to 2008. The federal court has ruled in favor of a Frog Lake First Nation member in a case over access to Band Council resolution documents. Community members have been calling for more transparency from their leadership since 2021. APTN video journalist Rachel May spoke with some of the people behind the court case.
I want to see corruption go away in our community eventually. I know it's going to be a process.
Member of Frog Lake First Nation near the Saskatchewan-Alberta border, Hans McCarthy, took Indigenous Services Canada to court with support from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. APTN National News reported in 2021 that Frog Lake's trust fund, which held $102 million in 2013, had dropped to just $3 million by 2019. Following that report, McCarthy filed an access to information request for Frog Lake Band Council resolutions to see where that $99 million went. But Indigenous Services Canada refused to release these records, leading him to argue in court that Ottawa has a duty to disclose this information to band members. McCarthy says he knew there was the possibility the funds were misused, but being unable to see how money was spent at the time was an emotional experience.
The first emotion was anger. It was overwhelming. I've always known that the community was not functional because I have uncles and aunties, and we're all related in the community. We all talk. We know what goes on in our community. But the thing is that we didn't have the documentations because Chief and Council never shared that.
The case was heard in federal court on September 10th in Vancouver. The court ruled in McCarthy's favor on November 20th, stating the documents requested must be handed over within 30 days. McCarthy hopes seeing the Band Council resolutions will shed light on where the money went and help inform people how to vote in future elections. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation supported McCarthy in court. Director Gage Hobrick said doing so fits their mandate to hold governments, including First Nation band councils, accountable.
Me and Hans have talked about this a lot, that anyone who lives in a regular municipality, a provincial government, you can usually go to the provincial government's website, the municipality's website, and find pretty detailed financial information, and that it's important to you as a taxpayer to kind of hold your own government accountable. But in many First Nations communities, that's just not the case.
Hobrick and McCarthy says this isn't just a win for Frog Lake First Nation, it's a win for all First Nations seeking transparency from their leadership. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Quebec is looking to pass a provincial constitution known as Bill 1. It states that First Nations and Inuit exist within Quebec, but the proposed constitution focuses on French culture. It states that Quebec people form a nation. The question of where Indigenous sovereignty fits within the bill is now being challenged. Quebec Justice Minister Simon Jolin Barrette tabled the bill in August of this year. He said he consulted with First Nations, but the Assembly of First Nations Quebec and Labrador says otherwise. AFN-QL Regional Chief Francis Vero-Paul says the AFN-QL does not speak for chiefs across Quebec, but he said the minister must meet with chiefs for consultations himself. The AFN-QL invited Minister Jolin Barrette to meet with chiefs across Quebec to discuss the bill. That meeting was held Tuesday in downtown Montreal.
Je suis venu rencontrer les différents chefs des différentes communautés de partout au Québec. On a pu échanger sur la question de la Constitution. Alors, ça a été une discussion très positive. On est à l'écoute. et on prend note des commentaires qui nous ont fait part.
I really don't think, very humbly, that Quebecers don't want to build a Quebec without First Nation. And I think this is our vision, to build together, to coexist, really coexist. And on the ground, I think it does happen. But at the political level, it's another story. So we're still working on that. And this has been the message that we share to the minister this morning. And even though he kind of tried to reassure us that it won't affect our rights, it won't affect our relationship, this is not the reading that we do of the bill that is presenting as of now.
We now want to tell you about this week's second web poll question. On our website, we ask, what is the most pressing issue facing Nunavut's new MLAs in the legislature? You can answer housing, child welfare, food insecurity, national defense, or unsure. Go to our website at aptnnews.ca to have your say. The question will be posted on the right-hand side of your homepage. A long-time award-winning Indigenous author has announced earlier this week that he is not Indigenous. Our next guest will speak to the issue and what it all means right after the break. Miigwech for staying with us. Rain in Fredericton at 7, Halifax, showers there as well at 9. Nain 0, Happy Valley Goose Bay -2. 2 in Saguenay, Quebec City, showers in 3. Toronto, rain in 11, Peterborough, cloudy in 10. Big Trout Lake -8, Sioux Lookout -7. Churchill, sunny and -12, Thompson -11. Winnipeg -3, Princess Harbor, partly cloudy and -5. Regina, cloudy and -10, Saskatoon, clear skies and -14. Uranium City -16, Buffalo Narrows -13. Sun's out in Peace River at -9, Fort McMurray -7. -3 in Lethbridge, Calgary -2. 9 in Tofino, Penticton 5. Minus 13 in Fort Nelson, Smithers +2. Minus 18 in Watson Lake, minus 21 in Mayo. Minus 21 in Norman Wells, minus 14 in Watee. Minus 13 in Sax Harbor, Deline minus 22. Baker Lake minus 18 and sun's out there, Chesterfield minus 15. And Iqaluit minus 12, Aglulik minus 15 and sunny there. Author Thomas King says he is not Indigenous after an investigation into his ancestry. King is the author of many books, including 2012's The Inconvenient Indian, a curious account of Native people in North America. To speak more about that is producer, writer, and actor Georgina Lightning, who joins us now from Edmonton and spoke to our Dennis Ward.
Georgina, really great to see you and to have you with us here. I guess we'll just start with your thoughts that longtime author Thomas King has admitted to not being Indigenous.
It came to us as a shock because it's always kind of been a gray area. There was always speculation that he was not Indigenous. But recently, we've been pulled into a conversation about one of Thomas King's books, Two Indians on Vacation, to be performed in Edmonton, Alberta on the stage here at the Edmonton Opera. So there was, the community was in an uprise about that. How come there's a non-Indigenous author being performed on our stage in the Day of Reconciliation? So Joel Ivany called us in and asked us to consult him, advise him on the situation, because they had never ever experienced this before. This was going to be the first Indigenous opera performed on the stages here in Edmonton. So when we placed it for a questioning from his agent, we got back that watch out for the Globe and Mail. There's going to be an interview, an article set out, and so the next day, after several threats and a lot of heat from the composer, the fact that he came out clean after, is he 84 years old? It's like a victory. Finally, we can put this to rest. There's no more conflict about it, because it's always been a gray area. People will defend him and people will argue against him. So this way it puts everything to rest. It's now out, it's fact, and it's victory for us.
You've been involved in the arts for decades. Your children have all been on the screen for decades. What does it mean, and what damage is done when someone misrepresents themselves like this?
The damage is, it strikes a chord emotionally. Like it's very profound. There's so many of us that are content creators. We write content based on our lived experience, based on our blood memory. Our spirit speaks to us when we're writing story, and it matters. Our voices haven't been heard. We're underrepresented in such a gross way that when there is an opportunity for somebody to step into this arena and appropriate, it's an act of violence. And to continue doing it, even though it's made aware or there's question about it. And, like Thomas King has been questioned for over a decade. Kyron Potts, he pointed out, why is this such a big deal? Because the universities knew for over a decade that Thomas King was a questionable person, and we all knew that he was not Indigenous. So why is this a shock today? It's a shock because he finally admitted. So Thomas King finally admitted. So instead of us all, staying in the gray where it leaves room for confrontation and conflict, etc., it's in black and white. There's never going to be a discussion about this again. But the harm is insane. Like Trickster, look at that example. There was an example of Vice, a job that I really wanted, a residency, and it was two cultural appropriators that got the job. Out of anybody that could have applied, it was Heather Ray and Michelle Latimer. I wanted that job, and I didn't get it because they're better at persuasion. We were just talking about the art of persuasion. I'm not great at that, I guess. So, there's a lot of losses. The whole cast and crew that were on Trickster, when I heard of the questionable genealogy of Michelle Latimer, pardon me, I immediately, the same day, wrote a letter to her, and I asked her, I said, I have an Indigenous company, 100% owned and operated. Can we acquire the rights and keep this train moving? Because there's so many people involved in this, in front of and behind the scenes. A lot of cultural representation from Kitimat Nation, and this is Eden's story. Like, it's Indigenous authored. And so let's keep it going, but she refused to give up the rights. And so that, look at that, whole production was canceled. And that was a big deal. We were emotional for a while on that one, we're all bruised by that one. So, yeah, and it continues to happen. And in the meetings, it's like, there's so many authors that you could write an opera. Richard's my neighbor, Richard Wagamese, Richard Van Camp, and more of Eden's books. Like, we have a lot of authors here, Christy Belcourt. Take one of their pieces and write an opera to it. Somebody who's bona fide,
Georgina,
it's not fair to take space.
Yeah, we'll have to leave it there, but it was great to see you, and appreciate you taking some time for us.
My pleasure. Thank you for covering this. Hi.
And that's your daytime newscast. Dennis Ward is back in a few hours for your evening newscast. Please join us then. From all of us at APTN National News Daytime, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next day.